Today's video is about this rather interesting new product from Hario. Now, this isn't yet available widely. I had to buy this one from Japan to get hold of it as early as I have. And it is a rather interesting thing. It's called the Air. It's a pouring kettle for the V60 that they have just released. It is made from plastic, but obviously it's designed to retain heat very well. So I wanted to know, can you get all of the benefits of a pouring kettle for just much less money? So we're going to test this out, and we're going to do it in a couple of different ways. I'm going to make some coffee with it, obviously, but I'm going to compare and contrast it to two other options that I think will give us the best kind of information overall. So first thing I'm going to do is not use this. The first thing I'm going to do is grab a regular pouring kettle, boil some water, and then I'm going to make a V60. I'm going to do a relatively small V60 because this has a 350ml capacity, so I'll brew 21 to 350 to sort of max out the jug. But I'll do that first of all with a very nice fancy pouring kettle, and then I'll do it with an electric one after this one. And then we're going to track the temperature in the V60 using a little data logger, and we'll see what we see. Freshly boiled kettle. Let's put a similar amount in. Let's not fill it all the way, but close to that 350 line. And here we go. Now I've got a data logger running in here. This is the very traditional kettle experience. Now you've probably seen me make a V60 before. If you haven't seen me make a V60 before, I'll leave a link up here so you can follow along. Overall, this is a very enjoyable experience. It's what I'd expect. This is a particularly nice pouring kettle. It's got the nice rubberized handle as well. Now, interestingly, the peak temperature in this brew, when I didn't preheat this kettle, was only 85 degrees Celsius. Now, you could argue you should always preheat your pouring kettle, and in the past, I have made exactly that argument, but I just want to see how it compares. I won't be preheating this, and I will be performing the same experiment, so that should be pretty interesting. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. So now we've got a benchmark of sorts. We can do the same test again with this thing. I'm just going to start my data logger. Very interesting little experience. Ooh. So you've got all the control for sure, pouring with this thing. That's been relatively easy to do. Now that size, I'll talk about it now, 350ml is a little bit small for me, if I'm honest. I think it could be bigger. I wish already that it would do a ½ litre brew, which it sadly doesn't. You could top up as you were pouring, but that would be a little bit more faff. You'd probably get some better thermal retention if your hot water was partially kept in a hot kettle though. Now as you pour, it does feel very light in the hand. It lacks the heft of a pouring kettle. So you can see why they called it the Air, but it does feel much, much lighter. It's kind of weird actually to be pouring from something like this. And when you're pouring with a pouring kettle, you can get a nice kind of circular motion going. This sort of lacks the momentum for that, so it's actually a little bit more of an intentional experience when you're pouring with this thing. And these last few bits feel quite trickly, though overall the flow has been pretty easy to sort of control. Having a quick look at my data logger, it would seem that the temperature got a little bit higher than the metal kettle, but not much higher at all. It peaked out at around 86 degrees Celsius. So at 320, the brew's done. Now for the last test, which we're going to take an electric pouring kettle, so that will be as hot as is possible, and we'll do exactly the same thing all over again with that. There's that heavy kettle feeling. I'd obviously expect this to be much hotter. This is boiled here in this kettle. It's got a big thermal mass of metal around it. It should be the hottest brew, notably. The question is, how much hotter is it going to be than either of the two options? Now I poured a little bit quicker than I meant to on that brew, and that is one of the things about heavier kettles. It's a little bit easier to pour more than you want to. I actually felt like I maybe had a touch more control with the lighter of the two options. It was harder to just, throw a bit more water in that way. Looking at the logger right now, it did achieve a much, much higher temperature. It went up to about 91 degrees Celsius at its peak, which is notably hotter than the other two. So unquestionably, decanting does play a role in dropping the temperature of your brew. And generally speaking, I do prefer higher temperature brews. So for our last test, we have aggressively preheated this little jug just to see if that makes any difference. Now you can see steam happening here, and the more evaporation that's going to happen, and the more open surface area you have, the more evaporation you're going to have, the more evaporative cooling you're going to have, the faster the liquid in this jug is going to cool down, regardless of how warm the jacket is around it. I do like pouring with it though. It's quite a pleasurable experience all round. Like, it's a nice jug to pour from. It's a little different in terms of muscle memory, I suppose, if you've done this a lot. But yeah, it's all right. So looking at this now, I can already see the max temperature we reached was just below 88 degrees Celsius. So we gained a couple degrees. There was a benefit, but we're still not as close as an actual kettle. I think a lid could be an interesting addition to this to really help improve its thermal stability. And I also think having it be a little bit bigger and having a bigger mass of water inside it would be a nice way to improve its thermal stability too. But if you like brewing at cooler temperatures, if you like more developed roasts that you don't want to bring out that slightly harsher side and you want to brew that little bit cooler, that's certainly not a problem. And with lighter roasts, yeah, going hotter might be a little bit better, but it is a world of diminishing returns. I like to go as hot as I can because, generally speaking, I find that tastes the best, but I don't anticipate these brews tasting particularly bad. 3:30 on the money, that brew's done. I suppose we should do a little tasting and wrap up some thoughts. So for just a quick taste. What's interesting is that these three brews are kind of ascending very slightly in temperature, but otherwise we're very, very similar. Now this is poor science because this isn't blind. It's very obvious which is which. They're different temperatures to start with. And in addition, I do have a confirmation bias here in that I generally prefer higher temperatures, and so I'm more likely to lean towards the one that does come from a higher temperature. But I would say there is a small increase in sweetness each time as we go up. All cups are pretty enjoyable, actually. I wouldn't be upset to be served any of these, to have brewed them myself. I would be perfectly happy to drink all three, but I do prefer them a little bit hotter. So what about this? It's an intense piece of design. It's pretty shocking to look at. It looks a little bit like a bird, a little bit like a plague doctor. It's a weird looking thing, but it works. It's quite pleasant to pour with. It's definitely a different experience, but you've got all the control you could ever need. Now, right now in Japan, this is pretty cheap. 1,400 yen, that's about £10 in the UK, or about $13. I don't anticipate it being that price once it's exported from Japan, once you've got, additional taxes or cost of shipping or that kind of stuff. But it should be much cheaper than a pouring kettle. Do I want one? I would. It's small, it's lightweight, it's easier to store and keep around than a pouring kettle in a compact kitchen, for example, and I kind of like it. It's useful. It has a place. And while it may not replace an electric pour-over kettle for me or for those obsessing about these things, for a simple, elegant solution to the problem of how do I pour gently if I don't have a fancy pouring kettle, well, this is a good answer. I'll be interested to see what they do with it in the future. Like I said, I'd love it to be bigger and I'd love it to have a lid just to do a little bit better on the thermal stability, but it's kind of cool. But I'd like to know what you think. Have you seen this before? Is this new? Is this a bit of a surprise? Does the design put you off? Do you want to use one? Does this have a place in your home? Have you somehow already got one too? I'd be super interested to hear your thoughts. But for now, I'll say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.